DNA analysis didn't exist, so Overton had no way of proving that that blood was Ippolita's or his own or somebody else's. And so as Overton was racking his brain, trying to figure out what he was missing, there was a knock on his door. And so Overton got up and he opened the door and he saw a man in a nice suit standing there. And the man asked if Overton had a few minutes to chat. He said it was about Ippolita's murder. Now, Overton didn't recognize him, so he was a little confused, but he needs some leads here. He needs progress on this case. So he said, yeah, come on in, let's chat. And so they sat down and this well-dressed man explained who he was. And then he launched into this incredibly wild story that at first didn't seem to have anything to do with the murder case. Then it was like all at once, Overton realized that what this man was saying was the key to his entire case. Based on all the evidence, which included letters and witness interviews, this is what police believe happened to Ippolita Hoyos on the night of November 2nd, 1888. Once it was totally dark out, the killer walked down a quiet, deserted road in the forest between Chantilly and Senlis, and as they walked along, they were absolutely buzzing with anticipation. The plan they'd been working on for weeks was about to be completed, and their victim had no idea what was coming. Up ahead, there was this bridge, this narrow bridge that went over some railroad tracks, and on the bridge was a man in a three-piece suit, and he was the target. The killer knew this man was worth a fortune to them, and so all they had to do now was just kill him, and they, the killer, would be set for life. And so carefully, trying not to make a sound, the killer began hustling toward the bridge. And as they did, they reached into their jacket and they pulled out a hatchet. And so finally they got to the bridge and they crept up right behind their victim. And without the man even noticing, the killer raised the hatchet and brought it down on the back of this guy's head. And then after that, they hit him over and over again with the hatchet until the man stopped moving. After that, the killer put away their hatchet and then lifted this man's body up and dumped it over the railing, and it fell down below. And then the killer, they walked off the bridge and turned around and went down the hill down to those railroad tracks, and they grabbed the body of their victim and dragged it and placed the body on the tracks. They were hoping that by doing this, it would look like, this guy was hit by a train, not murdered. But before the killer could actually flee the scene, they first had to do one more thing, just to make sure they wouldn't get caught. And so they reached into their own pocket and they pulled out two items, a handkerchief and a piece of paper with an address on it, and they stuffed both of these items in the jacket pocket of their victim, and then the killer fled. The victim was not Ippolita Hoyos. He was the killer. It would turn out the body that the investigators thought belonged to Ippolita was actually Ippolita's own friend, Louis Baron. So Ippolita and his wife Alphonsine, they conspired to murder Louis and make it appear like his body was actually Ippolita's body. Because just a few months before the murder, Ippolita had taken out a life insurance claim on himself that in the event of his death, Alphonsine would be paid a huge sum of money. But Ippolita had no intention of dying. They needed somebody else to die on his behalf. And it just so happened that Louis actually already looked an awful lot like Ippolita, like strikingly similar. And so Ippolita lured Louis out to that deserted stretch of road in the woods on the way to a job interview, which was just pretext to lure his friend out there to be isolated. And there, Ippolita butchers his friend with the hatchet, kills him, and after hitting him over the head a bunch of times on the bridge, he flipped him over and hacked his face apart with the hatchet as well, just to ensure his face would be so badly mauled, nobody could recognize him. Ippolita also put that handkerchief and that note with the address in his pockets, which, by the way, he's literally wearing one of Ippolita's suits that he so, kindly allowed his friend to use for the job interview. It was a setup. He put those items inside of the suit and he's like, boom, now the police are gonna find this body, they're gonna think it's me, here's all this evidence that will suggest it's me, and I'm gonna get off scot-free. But Ippolita and his wife Alphonsine had left one big loose end. And that loose end was the well-dressed man who had walked into Judge Overton's office and basically cracked the case wide open. The well-dressed man at Overton's door was the president of an insurance company. And he told the judge that Ippolita had been shopping around for a life insurance policy just 2 months before his sudden murder, and that his insurance company had actually flagged Ippolita's application as possible fraud, and so they had not given him the policy. But he would tell Oberton that apparently after this failed attempt, Ippolita just reached out to another insurer who did take the bait, and as soon as that contract was signed and suddenly Ippolita had this policy, Ippolita supposedly died. And so after hearing these details from the president of this company, Oberton ordered the body to be exhumed and re-examined. And this time, when the body was compared against photos, investigators confirmed it was in fact Louis. The real Ippolita was tracked down in the north of France, where he was living under Louis's identity. He was charged with murder, and on June 15, 1889, he was sentenced to death.